I want to go ahead and discuss the craftsmanship and the heritage behind wine from vineyard to bottle. We always go back to France because that's the original country that really started writing down things about planting, what we call vinification. That is the, production of wine grapes. So about 500 AD, after the Romans had inhabited France for about 500 years, the Roman Empire began to crumble. And part of that had to do with a supply chain problem. They weren't able to get red wine over to France where the Romans were, and the Romans used that as a microbial to kill all of the little things that were growing and living in the water at that time that could make a person sick and unable to travel. The Romans, by putting red wine in their water, were able to travel and, of course, as we know, conquer the world. So once they had a supply chain issue in 500, because there were political issues going on in Rome, the Romans either had to evacuate France or they just resigned their commission and stayed and lived out their days in France as not Roman soldiers. So that plunged France into the Dark Ages, and there was a power vacuum because no one was making wine. And wine was needed, one, because the church needed it for sacrament, and two, because the general population needed it for, well, certainly enjoyment, but also because it was a source of calories. It kept people alive. It was a source of food, really. So the church went in under the understanding that they were producing wine for sacraments, and by doing so, took over some of the most valuable land assets in the country, and they would remain the most wealthy landholders up until the French Revolution. So in 500 AD, because the church took over the wine production, they began creating monasteries or churches about every 10 miles all throughout France. So why 10 miles? Well, basically that's where the villages were, and they were spaced out about that much because that's about how long it took a person to walk from one town to the next. Because again, as we've discussed in earlier segments, people weren't really able to travel because they had to be able to have a source of water and a source of food. And they, a lot of times, could only live on what they could carry. So you wanted to have monasteries spaced out about a day's walk apart. So then, even as the management of the church would go from monastery to monastery to check on how they were doing, and then, to manage the funds that were being donated by the church members, and to centralize that power, whether that be to the Vatican or just within the cardinals within the country of France, they had to have transportation. They had to be able to travel. And so wine had a big part in that too. So not only in 500 did you have wine as one of the main backbones of the economy, but it was really what allowed people to move around and to have, as I said, extra calories. So going back to the importance of the monks within the monasteries is that these were the people at the time that were being taught to read. They read the Bible. They taught to their parishioners. They served the village in a lot of different ways. They were skilled. They would help out the village in however they could. But a lot of the brothers had all the time in the world to grow wine, to produce beer, to grow food for the monastery. And so they had not only the skills and the ability because they could read, but they also had the time to sit and document all of the different things that they tried. So they would take a plot of land and try every different type of grape, every different type of vegetable, every different type of herb, like lavender is a big one in France. And they would really discover which were the best parcels of land for each fruit, vegetable, herb, or in converse, on this particular piece of land, what is going to really thrive here? So that's when we started to see over hundreds of years how the wine actually started to become really amazing, and how we've had 16 generations on the same plot of land producing the same grapes, producing more or less the same wines. And so I wanted to talk to you today about just having some reverence, paying some attention to all of that effort, all of that tradition